So, a farmer had a horse. The horse ran away. His neighbor said, "Such bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with 3 wild horses. The neighbor said, "Oh, how wonderful." The farmer replied, "Maybe." Later, the farmer's son broke his leg while trying to tame one of the wild horses. The neighbors lamented, "Oh, such bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." Soon after, soldiers came to recruit young men for war, but the farmer's son was spared due to his broken leg. The neighbors congratulated the farmer and said, "That's wonderful, this is great." The farmer said, "Maybe." This Buddhist folktale, often told in Zen circles about the farmer whose wise response was always, "Maybe," it makes a very fine point. If a person responds to everyday experiences with attachment, that is a judgment, an opinion, or an assumption about whether an experience is good or bad, riding that up and down of expectations, if that is the case, then suffering is going to occur. More suffering is going to occur. This part of understanding that the value we place on an experience, this is awful, this is wonderful, is such a high and a low and a high and a low, and it's hard to find balance. So this is the mind-blowing fact, if you will, that Siddhartha realized upon reaching enlightenment, that we don't have to live constantly with this up and down, oh, it's awful, oh, it's wonderful, oh, it's awful aspect to daily living. My intent today is to recognize Bodhi Day. So Bodhi Day is the day of the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, the day he reached enlightenment. Talk about the biggest aha moment in history, right? So when he located the root of suffering and went on for the next 40 or so years, they say, or days, 48 days, many, we don't know, it was so long ago. But he went on for 40 some odd years to show others how to have a life that's less suffering. This auspicious day is celebrated in the secular calendar on the same day every year in December the 8th. However, the other Bodhi Day is based on the lunar calendar. So like Easter, the date changes year to year according to the moon and the lunar calendar. January 7th, 2025 is the next lunar Bodhi Day, often celebrated in many traditional Buddhist communities. As I said, I am Unitarian Universalist because I ascribe to the fact that I trust and believe in pluralism. I gain, for me, knowledge, wisdom, and comfort from Eastern traditions. So the story of old goes like this. Siddhartha, meaning one who has accomplished a goal, or Shakyamuni, Shakya from the one who was from the Shakya clan. He was a Hindu prince, born in 5th or 6th century before the Common Era. How many centuries ago? My goodness, right? He grew up in a kingdom in what is known today as Nepal. His father, the king, wanted to shelter his son from observing suffering. Those of us who are parents, we get that. However, we do a disservice when we shelter a child from understanding all aspects of life. So, in this case, the king sheltered his son. Sometime in his early adult years, Siddhartha sneaked outside of the kingdom and witnessed poverty, death, and disease. He was overwhelmed by what he had witnessed. So there's no denying the physical aspects of suffering he had observed, but soon He explored how one's perspectives or views on suffering influenced a person's experience, how a person copes. He vowed to do something to assuage the misery of others. So Siddhartha thereafter resolved to sit under a peepal tree, Peepal, but it's known today as a Bodhi tree. He wanted to just sit and simply meditate until realization was achieved or enlightenment. It could have been 7 days. It could have been many days. Again, because it was so long ago, we're not sure. But once he arrived at enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he identified the following 4 noble truths. As outlined by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, they are, there is suffering. These seem so simple, but the more you contemplate it, the more you're like, oh my gosh, why wasn't this realized earlier? There is suffering. There is a reason for suffering. There is a way out of suffering. The Eightfold Path can assist. This reflection addressed the role of transformation, meaning to change the world, one must begin with the self. Assumptions and mindfulness assist that understanding. Just a note here to remind you all, pluralism is a value that we Unitarian Universalists cherish, and so is transformation. Those are 2 that are part of our values. In the past, when I've shared how I have personally benefited from Eastern traditions, people have said, oh my gosh, all that focus on suffering, how depressing. To which I respond, if one begins to accept the fact that life is full of suffering, then you have nowhere else to go but up, and you will see the joys inherent in living. This is where the Eightfold Path exists. So a quick online search. Jeremy, would you put that? Yeah, there you go. So you can research this, and honestly, this is pretty fundamental in Buddhism itself, but if you go into each one of those categories, so the translation, to me, it's right action, right mindfulness, right view, but if you think about it, in reality, it's skilled. We are all on a journey, and part of it is we're not going to arrive at enlightenment, sorry, but we can learn, right? And we can become more skillful at understanding how to view experiences in life. So if you look at this and you think skilled mindfulness and skilled view, that for me is a more accurate translation, meaning part of suffering, of one's suffering, involves judgment and opinions regarding events or experiences. So the goal is learning to identify and change one's perspective. Skilled mindfulness and view says, hold up. What am I missing when I cannot get past my assumption about what this person said to me or this attachment to what happened when this incident happened? There was a Buddhist nun named Rengetsu. True story. You can show that slide. Thank you. Her life as a nun began when her husband and young child died. To support herself, she worked as a potter, a poet, and an artist. Her exquisite poetry gained her instant fame. So this is the thing. When you're famous, people come after you, don't they? So trying to avoid the constant press of customers, she soon found herself moving from one home to the next. One evening, on a pilgrimage in a remote area, she had hiked since noon without having passed through a single village. Finally, as dusk fell, she came upon a small settlement and approached an inn, whereby she asked for lodging. The inn was already full. Where have I heard this before? In this case, in this story from Buddhism, the inn was full. So she retraced her steps to an orchard with soft grass, and she bedded down for the night. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by a bright full moon. Directly above her were thousands of cherry blossoms that opened in the night. She bowed to the village for having given her this unexpected gift of turning her away. She wrote, "Through their kindness in refusing me lodging, I found myself beneath the beautiful blossoms of the night of the misty moon." Now, if any one of us were in the nun in this true story, I wonder how many of us would have expressed gratitude at having denied a place to sleep. Would we have been angry? I suspect so. So this kind of mindfulness that this nun was working from, a place of gratitude, it takes time, and it takes presence in understanding your thought processes. I'm angry. I notice I'm angry. What is it I'm not seeing in this situation? The Buddha's teaching, or Dharma, encourages us to be mindful of our thoughts and our emotions, observing how assumptions manifest and then can impede the path to finding more balance in daily living. Sharon Salzberg, a well-known teacher of Buddhism in this country, wrote, "Here are some familiar assumptions you might recognize," she said. "We have nothing in common. I won't be able to do it. You can't reason with a person like that. Tomorrow will be exactly like today. If I just try hard enough, I can manage that person. Only big risks make me feel alive. I've blown it. I should just give up. I know just what she's going to say, so I don't really need to listen to her. Happiness is for other people, not for me." Statements like these, maybe you've said some of these, maybe you've felt these or thought them. They're motivated by fear, by desire, by boredom, by ignorance, by a lack of compassion for someone. That's the end of her quote. "Assumptions bind us to the past, obscure the present, limit our sense of what is possible, and elbows out joy. Until we detect and examine our assumptions, they short-circuit our ability to observe objectively. We think we already know what's what." How many of us have said regarding 2025, we already know what's going to happen? Clinging to this assumption is not helpful. Granted, it's okay to be mindful of a concern, but it's not helpful to jump into a reality that may or may not appear. Focusing on present moment mindfulness or awareness is the key to finding more joy. Life is too short for adhering to anxiety-producing projection about all things that may or may not happen. We will miss the gifts of the present moment if we're constantly projecting what we know will happen. So people often ask me about my personal beliefs. Although I was raised Christian, I no longer identify as such. I fully appreciate, respect, and try to emulate the actions of the historical Jesus, a man who, it appears, existed and preached about authentic love and who was a radical Jew hell-bent on protesting injustice in Roman law. That being said, I personally benefit from teachings located in Hinduism, Buddhism, and more specifically, the modern-day approach to early teachings, even before Hinduism and Buddhism. And in the West, a lot of philosophers talking about mindfulness. When I was pregnant with my son 39 years ago, my doctor encouraged me to meditate to lower my anxiety about the birthing process. Believe you me, the inevitable fact of suffering is very present to anyone who is carrying a child. There's no way to argue. This is not going to be easy. So I read books and I began to sit quietly, to close my eyes and focus on breath, noting my surroundings and thoughts that I encountered. It was not an easy process in the beginning, but as time went by, my mind and my body tended to settle into a pattern of calm, steady existence. After my son was born, there was little time for sitting. So I made it my intent to simply be mindful of the fact of change, to appreciate every tireless night of care for my little one, knowing that life won't be this way forever, and to pause to cherish the beauty, the love, the laughter, the bird song, the fragrance of the herbs in my garden, the gentle clinking of the chain on the porch swing, the sound of footsteps on the 100-year-old wood floors, and the way light filtered through the old windows on frosty mornings. I don't need to say anymore. You get my drift, right? Being very present in what we're experiencing, the present moment, knowing it won't be like this forever. So several years ago at a workshop with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he said, "Stay in the tradition in which you were raised. However, if that no longer assists you, maybe you will find something helpful here today." I loved this approach to inviting one to pursue a spiritual journey. Metaphorically speaking, he implied, start where you are, young grasshopper. It's okay. You don't have to fit into a box to be a human being on a spiritual journey. So I'm going to close this sermon, with a lovely poem by Brad Aaron Maudlin. It is listed in his book of poems titled "Everyone at This Party Has Two Names." The title of this piece is "What You Missed the Day You Were Absent from 4th Grade." Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas. Peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how to not feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without the feeling that you have forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm or sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you are enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost, and one person, they all add up to something. Blessed be. It seems only fitting to end this with a namaste. So put your hands against your heart. The spirit, the light, the divine, the human in me sees you. Namaste. Thank you.